Recently, I finished a book called Bad Girls Go Everywhere: The Life of Helen Gurley Brown. You might be asking yourself, who is Helen Gurley Brown? I've never heard of that person. Well, you're not alone. Until I picked up this book, I'd never heard of her either. Helen Gurley Brown is famous most notably for a book she wrote in 1962 called Sex and the Single Girl, which at the time was a phenomenal bestseller, not to mention highly controversial. Helen Gurley Brown became the spokesperson for single women everywhere in the 1960s. Of course, her greatest claim to fame would be the 30-some-odd years that she spent as the editor for Cosmopolitan magazine. This woman is seriously BA. I can't believe I've never heard of her before. This book not only introduced me to a fantastically independent and driven and motivated woman, it also served as a great introduction to the multiple currents of feminism that began in the 1960s and continue even into our own day. When I finished reading this book, it left me wanting to know more. Because really, feminism can be confusing. I felt it was my duty to go on the internet and find out more. According to Wikipedia, feminism is a collection of movements and ideologies that share the common goals of defining, establishing, and achieving equal political, economic, cultural, personal, and social rights for women. That sounds good, but what defines feminist? A feminist is generally any individual who self-defines as advocating for or supporting the rights and equality of women. That's pretty simple, right? But wait a second. What's all this about first, second, and third wave feminism? Okay, so the history of feminism goes like this. In the first wave, we had the suffragettes from the 19th and early 20th centuries who campaigned for women's right to vote. Oh yeah, we learn about them in history class. Right, so the suffragettes wanted women's right to vote, but they didn't really campaign for anything else. Broadly speaking, as a movement, for the most part, they just wanted the right to vote. Okay, then what's all this second wave feminism? Second wave feminism, beginning in the 1960s, was largely concerned with issues of equality other than suffrage, like ending discrimination in the workplace. Second wave feminists viewed women's cultural and political inequalities as inextricably linked. The second wave of feminism encouraged women to reject fashion and beauty enhancements, as these things seemed to be pushed by men and relegated women to the status of sex objects, thereby making them unequal to men in the workplace and in the home. Okay. The third wave of feminism, which began in the early 1990s, was a response to the failures of the second wave feminism and as a backlash against the initiatives and movements created by the second wave. Hindsight being 2020, the second wave feminism was mostly about white middle-class women. The main difference of supporters of third wave feminism versus second wave feminism is the issue of sexuality. Mostly the second wave feminists were, sex is bad, don't be sexy. Whereas third wave feminists thought that sex was good and that women should be equal to men in their enjoyment and use of sex. Third wave feminism also sought to acknowledge viewpoints of women outside of white middle-class women. Most of the confusion surrounding this whole issue is the fact that the second and third waves of feminism coexist today. So you have a lot of women in the older generations who are staunch second wave feminists, but then you have a lot of the younger generation women like myself who are staunch third wave feminists who say yes to our sexuality and also want to include people outside of our white middle-class majority. Interestingly enough, Helen Gurley Brown was a working-class girl, which is why most champions of the second wave feminism refuse to acknowledge her viewpoint or include her. Moving back to the book and the issue of Helen Gurley Brown, this book supported and encouraged a lifestyle that I've already chosen for myself, and it relieved me to know that it is in no way a new choice for hundreds of women, going all the way back to the 1960s and before. For a young woman striking out on her own who is indifferent to the call of marriage and ambivalent at best for the race to have children, reading about the life of Helen Gurley Brown has been an inspiring confirmation. And so, as Helen is oft quoted, good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere. Read it.